I'm Father Bob Stoeckig, Rector of Guardian Angel Cathedral in Las Vegas, Nevada, coming to you with another one of our reflections. But already those of you familiar with our channel can tell we're not in the cathedral for this one. This is a reflection about St. Joseph's feast day, and in particular this year, which is dedicated to St. Joseph, who's the universal patron of the Catholic Church. Today I'm at Monzú Italian Oven with my chef friend Gio Mauro, and we're going to talk a little bit about the tradition around St. Joseph, the St. Joseph's table, and why this feast in particular is important in the Italian cultures. Gio, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. There's nothing I love better than to speak about these traditions that have such a deep and meaningful meaning in my life, my spiritual life, and my family life. So thank you very much for the invitation. In Sicily, particularly where my family's from, St. Joseph is a huge feast. It starts with a famine that happened in the Middle Ages, when it really took its shape for what the feast is today. And the devout prayed to St. Joseph for rain, because they hadn't had rain in months and months and months. And they also promised that if rain came in a timely manner and they would be spared from famine, that they would in turn throw this big feast in his honor. And so it came to fruition. And the crop that came out first, that saved the population from famine, was a legume called fava bean. And so tied in with the tradition of St. Joseph is always present the fava bean in Italian, in Sicilian particular tradition.
So for those who might not know what a fava bean looks like, can you describe it?
So the English term is broad bean. So it resembles almost like a lima bean, but whereas a lima bean has a little bit of soapier, I like to describe, flavor, this is more of a green, snappy flavor, and it's absolutely delicious. And if you've never had a fava bean, I encourage you to seek them out, because they're absolutely wonderful. And there's a lot of dishes that come from that, and we could get into that if we have time to do it. But the particular thing, the shape that is meaningful in a spiritual level, is that when they threw this feast and they had a very limited amount of crop, they gave first dibs at the food to the people that were most in need. And so the ones that were the most malnourished and had the least means were the ones that went first in line. And it took shape into really a feast that provided for the poor and for those most in need in Sicily. So that evolved to these big, elaborate tables called a tavolata, in Sicilian. And over the years, over the centuries, it's gotten more and more elaborate. But what hasn't changed is the tradition that the families that have been identified, of the ones that are most in need, always get the first turn at choosing what they want to eat and what they would like to take back home to their home pantries and such. So it's really a beautiful, beautiful tradition that has been going on, and the Italian American communities have done it here in the United States. And any Little Italy here in Las Vegas, we see it at the Italian American Club. I try to do it here as well. But any Italian American community in the United States still follows this tradition. And so New York, I always say that New York has St. Patrick's Day Parade, and then New Orleans has St. Joseph's Day Parade as 2 days later, and it's still a huge tradition. So it's really wonderful, in my humble opinion.
Tell me too about your connection spiritually with food. Since you're a chef, you're a Catholic, how does food relate in this broader sense to this feast, but also for you personally? Since this is
Thank you.
This is taking place during Lent, so everybody's concerned with their own spiritual journey.
That's a It's a very deep question for me, and I thank you for it. So my first name is Giuseppe, which is Joseph, and I've always seen uh, Joseph as a huge guidance. I've always seen him as the keeper of family, devotion to the family, to the Sacra Familia, the sacred family. And in that, there's always this element of procurement for the father. And the father is meant to make sure that there's always food on the table, at least in how I see my role. And Saint Joseph has always been a big guide to me, and it's interesting that the duty translates for me in the kitchen in the sense that it's always the best of ingredients, because the ingredients that I'm able to procure shows the respect I have for the relationship. And of course it starts with my wife and my kids, and then it translates to everything I do in a professional manner. And I've never quite looked at it until you asked this question. This is a very deep question for me, and it really infiltrates and explains a lot of my obsessiveness for quality ingredients and procurement of things that aren't easily found, and always making sure that it is the freshest and the highest of quality, because that to me signifies that I am doing my calling, what I'm meant to do as a man, as a father, and as a husband. Yeah.
And I know that during this pandemic time, you've also used your baking skills from the restaurant to help feed people in Las Vegas. Do you want to talk about
Sure.
how the relationship with Catholic Charities of Southern Nevada came about?
Sure, I'd love to talk about that. And so one of my passions is bread. I find that bread is one of those wonderful products that is available to everybody. Everybody can have bread no matter what walk of life. And what I've seen throughout the years is this is a decline in bread quality because of abundance. We have so much of everything that is so elevated that the basics kind of get lost and get murked up. And this to me is a basic food. And when the pandemic hit and the shelves started getting empty, so toilet paper, of course, was one of them, right? And we all still laugh about that, how we ran out of toilet paper. But the other thing that I saw is that there was no bread on the shelf because people went back to the basics, and they couldn't go out to eat. It was very easy for them to get a loaf of bread, slice it up, and make a sandwich at home, or fry it with an egg, or so on. And what I decided to do was, when we had to shut down the restaurant, is still keep our bread production up and be able to provide that to the community. Well, sometimes we had leftover bread, and I didn't quite know what to do with it. And through your connection and connection with Catholic Charity, we thought, wouldn't it be wonderful to start providing bread for Catholic Charities so that people in need could have one of the best expressions of bread that is available in the city. There's many of us that do bread at this level, but I don't think that there's a lot of availability. And so it was really wonderful to see and get the feedback from people when they had this bread of, wow, the older generation, what this reminds me of bread that I used to eat as a kid. And that is always such a heart-swelling moment for me. Or the younger generation, I've never had bread that tasted this good and was this fulfilling and just with so many flavors. And it was really a wonderful moment for me. So yeah, thank you for letting me share that.
Yeah, and I think there's a nice connection between that story and this feast and the emphasis on making sure that the poor get fed. That's a great part of our Lenten tradition. And since this feast falls always during Lent, it's a nice connection between food, family, and care for the poor and vulnerable.
Agreed. And I'm constantly reminded that the more we do for people in need, and the better overall feeling one gets about life and happiness and being content. I see it. I've been guilty of this during different episodes of my life. How we get in a trap of pursuing things that think they're going to make us happy, and in the end, it's helping others and giving that gives us the most. At least for me, gives me the most satisfaction. Speaking for myself, and it never ends. There's this law of diminishing return that the more you do something and your reward kind of starts lessening, but I don't find it with giving. Every time I give, it feels great, and it's something that I invite everybody to adapt in their life, especially during Lent. It's one of our many wonderful traditions, but I seem to connect the most to it.
St. Joseph's feast day, of course, is March 19th, coming up shortly. We're filming this a little bit in advance so that we could find a quiet Saturday morning in your restaurant. What do your children know about the feast, and how do you keep it as a family?
So, as it stands right now, of course, the first thing they think of is all those decadent foods that are made at the table, because they're young children. They also know that it is celebrated in Italy and throughout Latin culture mostly as Father's Day. So we're able to celebrate it as Father's Day as a family, in keeping with that tradition, and we honor my father and my wife's father, and the kids honor me, and it's really wonderful. So, but they see the connection, and they understand the importance of honoring the unit, and that's a wonderful tradition to pass on. I think families are wanting to look different in this day and age, and it's nice to give recognition to the tradition that we have that has served our community and our lives very, very well, and celebrate what works for what I think works. I always relate it to the I, because I don't want to speak for anybody, but it works for me, and so it's nice to celebrate that with the kids.
So one of the things that you might do wherever you are to observe this St. Joseph's feast, not only think about St. Joseph, think about the role St. Joseph has as a universal patron in the church, but also use that tradition of St. Joseph's feast day to find some way to tie into your Lenten sharing, so that the most vulnerable among us get that choice food that Gio was talking about that's part of this feast. So with that, I'd like to thank you for letting us come to your workplace.
Thank you.
And talk about how your spirituality and your work integrate, and also to help people understand this broader tradition of why St. Joseph's feast is such a big feast with the Italian, and specifically, in your case, the Sicilian communities.
Yeah.
If you'd like, you could let us know where your restaurant's located if people also want to find you.
Sure. We're on the corner of Flamingo and Jones in Las Vegas, and my family's had a restaurant here for 30 years. We opened this one up 3 years ago, and you've inspired me. I'm going to make a commitment for St. Joseph and the rest of the month of March. I'm going to do some fava bean dishes, because first of all, I love fava beans, and then why not, right? Let's celebrate the.
That's great.
Let's celebrate the vegetable.
That's our reflection for this St. Joseph's Feast Day 2021. We hope you're keeping well, and we invite you to continue to pray for the cathedral community as we continue to promise to keep you in our prayers. Happy St. Joseph's Day.